Am I the asshole for basically abandoning my family and letting their lives fall apart because they treated me like a live-in tech support/ATM for my leech of a brother? Throw away again because my family probably lurks. So, yeah, the title pretty much sums it up, but the devil's in the details, right? I'm Leo, now pushing 29M, time flies when you're finally not fixing everyone else's problems, and for what felt like an eternity after graduating with a shiny computer science degree, I was still stuck in the vortex of my parents' house. The Bay Area rent situation is less of a crisis and more of a dystopian novel, so my office for a solid 3 years was the converted garage. Picture this: fluorescent lights, the faint smell of old lawnmower oil, and me hunched over multiple monitors, pulling 60-plus-hour weeks, cold emailing clients into oblivion, and slowly, painstakingly building my web development business from the ground up. My contribution to this idyllic living situation? A cool $900 a month in rent, plus my share of the ever-inflating utility bills and enough groceries to feed a small army, mostly myself, because my brother lived on instant ramen and parental guilt. Now, enter my younger brother, Caleb, who just turned 22M and is, to put it mildly, a black hole of potential. He managed to spectacularly fail out of community college not once, but twice. Yet, in the eyes of my parents, he remained the untarnished golden child, destined for something vaguely creative and definitely not requiring actual effort. His current passion project? Becoming a professional streamer. His setup? My former workspace, the aforementioned converted garage. His audience? Usually hovering somewhere between his 2 best friends and a couple of random internet strangers who probably clicked the wrong link. My parents, bless their enabling hearts, were fully on board. He needed the privacy and space for his high-end gaming rig, which, surprise surprise, I helped him pick out and troubleshoot. Meanwhile, I had just closed a $6,000 contract, a significant milestone for my fledgling business, and within days, our ancient water heater decided to stage a dramatic geyser show right before Christmas. Guess who footed the bill? Yours truly. Did I get a pat on the back? Thanks for saving us from freezing showers? Nope. Crickets. Just the usual expectation that Leo would handle it. So there I was, surrounded by the ghosts of deadlines past and the lingering scent of desperation, feeling this insidious mix of anger, resentment, and a bone-deep weariness. I had always been the responsible one, the dependable one, the one who quietly fixed things without expecting accolades. Yet, I was constantly relegated to the background, overshadowed by Caleb's fleeting interests and my parents' unwavering belief in his untapped genius. They'd throw mini parties for him when he hit 50 followers on Twitch, but my actual business successes were met with a casual, "That's nice, dear." I'd poured thousands into keeping their house functional, unclogging drains that looked like they housed ancient civilizations, rewiring dodgy outlets that were a fire hazard waiting to happen, even fixing their ancient computers more times than I can count, and yet, I was treated like a tenant, a necessary evil who happened to pay rent. That night, sleep was a luxury I couldn't afford. My brain became a torture chamber, replaying every single instance where my family had unequivocally chosen Caleb's comfort and supposed needs over my own well-being and legitimate accomplishments. The time they bought him a top-of-the-line microphone for his streaming while I was still using a $20 headset for client calls. The way they'd constantly ask me to pause important work to fix Caleb's latest gaming glitch. The endless stream of subtle, and not so subtle, criticisms about my obsession with work while Caleb was pursuing his dreams. The realization hit me with the force of a rogue wave: I had to escape this suffocating dynamic. My mental health was slowly eroding, and my business was stagnating under the weight of constant family obligations. The next morning, I skipped the usual tense breakfast ritual where Caleb would regale them with tales of his epic online victories and I'd silently seethe over burnt toast. Instead, I retreated to my car, the only space that truly felt like mine, and obsessively scoured apartment listings on my phone. I found a tiny studio in Oakland that seemed almost too good to be true. $1,900 a month in this market? Red flags were waving, but desperation is a powerful motivator. I had around $9,000 squirreled away, a testament to my relentless saving despite the constant drain of household expenses. Enough for the dreaded last months, and security deposit. I fired off a hopeful email to the landlord, my fingers crossed so tightly they were turning blue. Miraculously, I got a reply within the hour. I signed the lease and electronically transferred the deposit before anyone in my family even suspected a thing. When my mom sent her usual lengthy grocery list, filled with organic kale and artisanal cheeses that Caleb would never touch, I replied with a terse, "I'll grab some essentials for myself." The digital silence that followed was palpable. I started quietly taking stock of my belongings in the garage, meticulously sorting through years of accumulated tech gear, tools, and personal items. Each item I packed felt like a small act of rebellion, a step closer to freedom. As I began to systematically withdraw my support, the carefully constructed facade of our family dynamic started to crumble. The lawn, which I had religiously mowed every Saturday morning to avoid my dad's passive-aggressive sighs, transformed into a veritable jungle, a haven for rogue dandelions and suspiciously large weeds. The dishes in the sink, once a manageable post-meal cleanup, began to multiply exponentially, forming precarious towers of ceramic and cutlery. The Wi-Fi, which I usually resurrected with a sigh and a strategic router reboot, remained stubbornly offline, plunging the household into a state of digital dark ages. My dad eventually wandered into the garage, squinting at a half-packed box of my cables. "Leo," he began, his voice laced with a familiar tone of mild exasperation, "that lawn is looking rather unkempt." I just shrugged, my gaze fixed on the tangled mess of wires. "Yeah, well, not really planning on tackling it anymore." The bewildered look on his face was almost satisfying. Almost. By the third day of my newfound, not my circus, not my monkey's existence, my dad cornered me in the living room, his face a mask of bewildered annoyance. "What in the world is going on with you, Leo? You're acting different." I finally laid it all out, my voice surprisingly calm despite the years of pent-up frustration. I explained, in painstaking detail, how I had been the silent backbone of the household, the one consistently contributing time, effort, and significant amounts of money while Caleb coasted along, blissfully unaware of the real world. I recounted the endless repairs, the financial contributions that were never acknowledged, the constant prioritization of Caleb's frivolous pursuits over my legitimate needs. Then came the catalyst, the straw that finally broke the camel's back. My dad, in a moment of breathtaking obliviousness, or perhaps outright disregard, decided to sell my custom workbench. This wasn't just some off-the-shelf particle board monstrosity. I had designed and built it myself, meticulously crafting it to be the perfect height and layout for my work. He sold it to some guy down the street for a measly $50, claiming he needed the space now that I was hardly ever in the garage anyway. That's when something inside me snapped. The years of simmering resentment finally boiled over. I booked a U-Haul for the very next day. While my parents were embroiled in a heated argument about who was going to brave the treacherous landscape of the unwashed dishes and call Comcast to fix the perpetually malfunctioning internet, spoiler alert, definitely not Caleb, I began the methodical process of loading up the truck with the majority of my belongings. Moving day was a surreal blur of cardboard boxes, furniture awkwardly crammed into the U-Haul, and the stunned silence of my family. They stood in the driveway, a tableau of shock and disbelief, as I wrestled my desk chair into the back of the truck. My mom actually started to cry, a performance that felt both overly dramatic and strangely unconvincing. My dad, ever the pragmatist, when it suited him, tried to bargain with me, offering vague promises of talking things through and maybe finding a compromise. But my resolve, hardened by years of being taken for granted, was unshakable. I had been the family ATM and unpaid handyman for far too long. It was time for me to prioritize my own life, my own sanity, and my own future. With a final wave that felt more like a liberation than a farewell, I pulled away from the curb, leaving behind the overgrown lawn and the simmering resentment. The first week in my cramped but gloriously independent studio apartment was pure, unadulterated bliss. Silence. The freedom to eat takeout directly over my keyboard without judgment. No passive-aggressive sighs about my late-night coding sessions. Just me, my dual monitors, and the sweet, sweet sound of not being asked to troubleshoot the printer for the 10th time that month. But back at the homestead, the chickens had well and truly come home to roost. My mom called, her voice bordering on hysteria, about the internet still being down. I calmly suggested she try Googling how to reset your router or perhaps even, gasp, calling Comcast herself. The bewildered silence on the other end was almost comical. The text started trickling in, then escalated into a steady barrage of digital SOS signals. They couldn't figure out how to work the washing machine without my color-coded instructions. The garbage disposal was emitting ominous grinding noises that sounded suspiciously like the death throes of a small animal. The toilet in the guest bathroom, a relic from the previous century, had decided to stage a dramatic blockage. I felt a strange, conflicting mix of smug satisfaction and a nagging sense of familial obligation. Then came the inevitable big crisis. The ancient furnace, the same one I had shelled out thousands to repair just months prior, finally gave up the ghost in the middle of a particularly chilly week. My dad called, his voice tight with a level of panic I hadn't heard since Caleb accidentally deleted his entire college application essay. I offered to take a look, on one very specific condition. A family meeting. A real, honest-to-goodness sit-down to discuss their abysmal financial management, the glaring lack of responsibility from certain members, cough, Caleb, cough, and the urgent need for everyone to start pulling their own weight. The family meeting was, well, let's just say it wasn't a Hallmark movie moment. I laid out their actual monthly expenses versus their shockingly low income, or, again, the complete absence thereof in Caleb's case, presenting it all in a brutally honest spreadsheet. I proposed a realistic budget, a concept that seemed as foreign to them as quantum physics. I flat out stated that Caleb, at 22 years old, needed to get a job, a real one, not just playing video games for an audience smaller than our immediate family. Surprisingly, and perhaps out of sheer desperation, my dad actually backed me up. Caleb, predictably, threw a tantrum worthy of a toddler denied candy and stormed out of the house, slamming the door with enough force to rattle the framed family photos on the wall. But amidst the drama, I saw a flicker of dawning realization in my mom's eyes. The stark reality of their financial situation, laid out in cold, hard numbers, seemed to finally be sinking in. 3 weeks later, I received a text from my mom. Caleb got a job at a warehouse. I almost choked on my coffee. Miracles do happen, apparently. They even started sending me small, albeit inconsistent, Venmo payments towards the still outstanding furnace repair bill. Meanwhile, I was actually thriving in my own little bubble of independence. My business was gaining momentum, my stress levels had plummeted, and I could finally focus on my own goals without the constant drain of family drama. Fast forward 6 months. I cautiously agreed to another family dinner. The atmosphere was different. Subtly, but undeniably different. I was treated less like the live-in tech support/ATM and more like an actual guest. Caleb, to my astonishment, had apparently learned some basic household repairs, proudly demonstrating his newfound ability to unclog a sink, a skill I had performed countless times in the past. My parents seemed to have a slightly better grasp on their finances, even initiating a conversation about creating a more sustainable budget. They had even started making regular, albeit still small, payments towards the furnace debt. It dawned on me that sometimes, the seemingly cruelest act, withdrawing support and forcing people to face the consequences of their actions, can be the most compassionate thing you can do. My scorched earth exit, while emotionally taxing for everyone involved, had forced my family to confront their own dysfunction and take responsibility for their own lives. Final, possibly naive, thoughts. Look, I know some of you might be screaming at your screens, telling me I should have cut all ties and run for the hills. And honestly, there were days when that felt like the only viable option. But they are my family. And I've witnessed genuine change, a real sense of remorse and a willingness to learn. Rebuilding trust is a marathon, not a sprint, but I'm cautiously optimistic about our relationship moving forward. Maybe, just maybe, We can forge a healthier dynamic now that I'm not the default safety net. Trust is earned, and for the first time in a long time, I'm willing to give them the chance to earn it back. AITA for the dramatic exit? Maybe. But sometimes, you have to set the house on fire to rebuild on solid ground.